Crisis. Is it always a bad thing? So in the office the other day, I was talking to a lady who's living with a fairly advanced dementia, and she's living on her own. She lives near family, but not with them. And like most family care partners, they have a lot of other responsibilities going on in their lives, including other family members. So the patient, let's call her Heather, she gets family members to visit every single day, and they do some very important things for her, like bringing meals, doing laundry, housekeeping, managing finances, and supervising her medications. Heather's daughter, Janice, wanted us to talk about encouraging Heather to move into a place where she could get some more help, like a retirement home, where the cooking and the medications would be provided and there would always be someone around to supervise. So I said to Heather, planning ahead when you're able is often a good strategy. It can help you to avoid a crisis. Now, Heather's first language isn't English, and when I used the word crisis, I could see that she wasn't really understanding it. Janice said to me, I don't think my mom knows what the word crisis is. So I sort of cast about for words that maybe Heather would understand. And I said, disaster, catastrophe. And that Heather did seem to understand. But it got me thinking about what a crisis really is. We use that word a lot in healthcare. But what does it mean? There are lots of different definitions for the word crisis, and certainly catastrophe or disaster is high up on the list of synonyms. But some of the definitions I've read also indicate that a crisis is a turning point or a time when a critical decision needs to be made. You've probably also heard that in some languages, the word for crisis and opportunity are actually the same. In healthcare, we do use the word crisis quite a bit, and sometimes it's used sort of instrumentally. So an example might be when a hospital has no more capacity, no more beds, and no more space. They might call that a bed crisis. Or if the emergency department is completely full, they might call that a crisis. And then when there is that kind of crisis, sometimes there's additional funding that could be made available, or maybe some other beds will open up somewhere else. So deeming something a crisis can free up some other resources and can bring about some much needed change, sometimes only for a temporary period. So crisis can be a time when we can move things forward. A lot of people that I meet, a lot of care partners and people living with dementia, feel like if there's a crisis or if somebody says that things have gotten to a crisis, it's a failure. It means that we weren't able to stop this disaster or this catastrophe. But is that really so? Sometimes when we're at an impasse, a crisis is the only way to move things forward. So if we go back to the case of Heather, if there were to be some kind of a significant challenge in her life, it might prompt some of those other family members to get involved in her care. It might prompt Heather herself to kind of become a little bit more aware of some of the challenges and limitations that she's living with. Although remember that insight can be affected in someone who's living with dementia. And it might free up some additional resources in the healthcare system that wouldn't otherwise be available when things are running a bit more smoothly. It's kind of a paradox, and we really don't want people to have to fail or get into a crisis in order to get the resources that they need. But sometimes a crisis is what it takes to kind of get everybody's attention and move things forward. Sometimes a crisis can be an opportunity. Tell me what you think. Have you ever been in a crisis, and how did it resolve? what do you think about this term crisis as it's used in the healthcare system? Should we be calling it something else? Do you think it blames care partners and family members for getting themselves into that situation? I certainly hope that nobody feels like a failure because they are being deemed a crisis. It actually probably means that the system has failed the person.